Hello. So today I'd like to analyze a bullet game I played as white a few months ago. Now you might be wondering why are you analyzing a bullet game? Um, well, it's because I think there are a lot of instructional positional ideas that that I learned from this game and helped me reach. Currently, I'm above 2,000 rated on Lichess.com. Peak rating 2150 on bullet. Yeah. So it helped me finally cross that 2,000 gap, or 2,000 milestone. Anyways, so play starts out pretty normal with pretty natural developing moves. Just keep in mind that when you commit your pawn to e6, your light squared bishop is going to have a slightly harder time developing because it's stuck behind this pawn chain. That being said, this is a very normal opening, and there's nothing wrong with this. Okay. Yeah, I like to play this sort of Catalan setup with the fianchetto light squared bishop, knight in the knight in its home square, or how do I say this? The white knight loves this square, and pushing the c and d pawns, two squares. This is just what I prefer to play. I find it very easy to blitz out quickly, especially in low time formats, and it's solid and difficult to punish. Anyways, so black chooses to take. That's fine. So first question, white to play. How should white recapture? Okay, so you might think, well, might as well develop the queen since your knight is, on the perfect square. And this would be a mistake because it allows black to develop with tempo, hitting the queen, forcing the queen to pretty much go back to its home square. The other squares are not really that good and are a little bit clumsy. And black can all of a sudden justify taking early by getting the bishop out, getting the pawn out of the way of the bishop. And now black is ahead in development. Again, this is still the opening. This is pretty much completely equal. But as white, you want to be pressing for an advantage, and you don't want to fall behind in development. So taking with the queen would be a mistake. So the right move is to take with the knight. And right here, best would be to just castle. I did not do this. I chose to... Whoops, sorry. After black castles. Yeah, best would just be to castle in return. I chose to take because I wanted to move my queen to c2 in the future and apply pressure along these diagonals, maybe with the dark squared bishop. And also to... so that I wouldn't have to double my pawns in the event that he took. Now that being said, they could have taken on this turn, but they didn't. And yeah, I just want to put my queen here, so that's why I traded off my knight in the center. There's nothing, I don't think, seriously wrong with that move. Just maybe not, the top engine line, but it's the opening, so it's probably okay. Anyways, so what should black play here? Okay. Black needs to play d5. This comes with the threat of taking advantage of the pinned knight, and it allows black to take the center, get more space, and help make this bishop less cramped. Okay, black can think about developing the bishop to this diagonal, and you have a game of chess. The computer says this is completely equal. Okay, black did not play this. Instead, black chose to take on c3, which I think is a positional mistake. First of all, these were not made by the computer. They were put in by me. So, but even then, I don't think this is a good move because, first of all, I brought my queen to c2, so that I could recapture with my queen. So I'm not sure why black just lets me do what I wanted to do anyways. They pretty much just played into my hands. Second is that all of these dark squares are now kind of weak because most of white's pawns are on light squares with a light squared bishop. This guy's going to have a lot of trouble moving around when all your own pawns are taking up your own squares, right? And also, I still have my dark squared bishop. So now that black has traded off their dark squared bishop, who is going to contest mine? Pretty much the only piece that can right now is the queen. A queen should not be fighting for the same squares as a bishop, because a bishop is just inherently worth less. Even this knight is currently posted on a dark square, so it only has access to light squares. Anyways, just things to keep in mind. It's not a serious mistake, but I think it is a positional mistake. Okay, now black to play here. What should black play? Okay, black needs to play d5. Yeah, black needs to, again, take space for largely the same reasons that I mentioned a move prior. And if this happens, then black can now develop and you have a game of chess. This is pretty much equal. Instead, black plays rook b8, which I think is a serious mistake. Take a moment, try and figure out what is the best move for white. Okay. It's bishop c4. The reason being is that I'm able to develop with tempo. And later on, I get to really take advantage of these weak dark squares in black's position, since, again, all these pawns are sort of blocking in their own bishop. Black should not have allowed this. Black needed to take the center right now. Anyways. Also, there is no good place to put this rook on this file, right? The only available squares are b7, b6, and a8. Engine suggests a8. The other squares are... Whoops. These squares are just clumsy because they get in the way of your own pieces, and I will later explain why rook b6 is not a good move. Now you might be wondering, why not d6? And maybe pause the video here and try and figure out what best to play for white. Okay. It's rook d1. That being said, now there's just a ton of pressure on this pawn. And now the computer suggests going back with the knight, c5, taking advantage of this pin and the poor rook placement. Queen trade, and remember the knight cannot take because the knight is devoted to the defense of this pawn. And now this is very difficult to play as black. This pawn is difficult to stop, and this bishop is, again, still being blocked in by its own pawns. Okay. You might be wondering, why not bishop takes c6? And try and figure out what black's response to this might be. Okay. So, bishop takes gives up all of white's advantage, because by playing d6, black can now play e5, because now this pawn is adequately supported. This forces black to reposition the bishop, and now by playing the moves d6 and e5, black is now able to free the light squared bishop. And now it's white that's having trouble developing, because white can't castle due to this really nice bishop post. For the cost of one pawn, now it is black that has a positional advantage. So that is why bishop c6 is not good. Okay. So, going back, d6 is a nice try, but it does not work because of rook d1. Okay, now rook b6. And now try and figure out what is white's best few moves here. Okay, white should lock in the dark squares and fix this pawn on d7, because if this pawn can't move, then this bishop has a really difficult time developing. Also, this hits the rook. Rook steps out of the way, and now black has a really nice dark square bind on white's position. This is why earlier rook b6 is not good, because it allows white to play c5 with tempo. And where is this rook going to go anyways? Again, a lot of these squares are not good. The only available squares for this rook are these three, and none of them are very appealing. So black steps forward with the rook, and I think this is a mistake, but maybe the engine doesn't necessarily agree with me. Because again, it just allows me to take a lot of space with tempo. And now black should go straight back. However, black chooses to drop to the side, as if trying to justify why they came here. And this pretty much walks into white's plan of expanding on the queen side, and now this rook and bishop are extremely sad. The rook is completely dominated by the queenside pawns, and this bishop now cannot even make use of this square and this diagonal because the rook is stuck here. Okay, white castles, which may not be the most accurate move. Black to play. What should black play here? Okay, black should play knight d5, which at least helps black untangle a little bit, because since all these pawns are pretty much can't really move, since white has too much control over the e5 square, black should get the knight out of the way of the f pawn and try and expand on the king side. These are the top moves suggested by the engine. The engine recommends trading off your really bad rook. And I'll just stop this engine line up to here. That being said, this is still very much winning for white because of the position. It's very difficult to play this as black. However, black does have more counterplay here, and the position is more dynamic. White still needs to look carefully and try and find good ways to convert this position, because the material is still completely equal. And it's easier to complicate matters when your pieces have a lot more activity in this position. Anyways, black did not play knight d5. Instead, black plays e5, which... what is the best response to this as white? Okay, best is e4. Just lock down the position. And now, the rest of the plan for white should pretty much just be to run through on the queen side, because black's pieces are now completely tied down. However, white did not do this. White chose to take. And now, what is black's best move? Okay. Black should play d5. And now this light squared bishop can finally get developed. Maybe not to this square, but, to here. And black is now able to untangle a little bit. That being said, this would, yes, white can win the pawn here, but it's worth giving up this pawn anyways, since this pawn, the d pawn on d7 is not good. It's a pawn that black wishes they didn't have, so it's perfectly fine to give up this pawn in exchange for development and activity. Okay, so black did not play this. Instead, black chose to jump in the center, which is one move too late. Okay, yeah, now black to move. What is the best move for black here? Okay, black can take on b4, which, since the queen is tied down to the defense of this pawn. Now, play would continue. This is what the engine suggests. And at least now, black's queen is developed. And again, this is still winning for white. I'm guessing the engine gives us about +3. Even though this is not good, it's important to at least get some activity out, because the more activity you have, the more chances that you can look for counterplay. Okay, black did not do this. Instead, black chose to play f6, attempting to defend the g7 pawn. And now, white is able to return to d6 and maintains the firm grip on the black position. All of these pieces are pretty much completely tied down thanks to white's bishop and 2 pawns, or 3 pawns. So this bishop is, what is this, like 6 points of material are tying down around 17 points of material. That's pretty bad. Okay, so black chooses to play rook e6. Rook e2 doesn't really work because white can just push through on the queen side, and this is what the engine suggests. Just start trading everything down. By taking on e2, white is now able to now has access to the e file, and black's position is still pretty bad. This rook is still doing nothing. Okay, so what follows next is maybe not too much to comment about. Just winning a pawn. Mysterious move. I don't understand this one. Just pushing through on the queen side. Yeah. Again, I didn't really understand the c6 move, because if black wanted to take the bishop anyways, they should have just done it in one turn. There's no reason to allow white to push a pawn for free, especially when these pawns are pretty much very close to queening, since the black queen side is very weak. And I think just taking here is the best move, because also this rook is terrible and this bishop is excellent. Okay, but maybe there's not too much to comment about. Play does not continue for too many turns. Yep, stepping out of the pin. And black cannot take on d6. Do you know why? Okay, because if black takes on d6, there are back rank issues. The queen will have to give itself up. Same thing goes if the queen takes. There's no good solution to black's weak back rank. So this pawn is untouchable. Play only continues for a couple more moves. And black resigns. Black is up in exchange, as well as just 2 pawns on the queen side. And black has no counterplay whatsoever. What the engine suggests is the best plan is to pretty much pile up on this bishop, which has not moved all game, and now there is no good solution. This bishop will be lost because it's only defended twice and attacked 3 times. So yeah, computer suggests just giving up the bishop, and from here you can just trade down material, and black has no counterplay. These two pawns cannot be stopped. The computer gives us about, plus 20 advantage or something silly like that. Okay. So, what are the key takeaways that we can learn from this game? First off is that if you can develop with tempo, you should. Right? This is why queen takes is not a good move, because it allows black easy development with tempo. This is why black ended up in such a bad positional bind, is because this bishop was able to gain access to the d6 square for free, thanks to this really poor rook move, because now black needs to respond to the threat on the rook. Thinking back on this position, actually, maybe best for black is to just give up the exchange. Like so. Because if white gives up this light squared bishop for this rook, yeah, I mean, it is tough to play, but at least you're not so cramped, and you can still always fight for this d5 advance. This position definitely seems a lot easier to play than here. Okay. Another idea is that when you trade off your dark squared bishop, you need to make sure that you have someone else around to contest the dark squares, especially when your opponent still has their dark squared bishop. Okay? By giving up the dark squared bishop, this bishop is free to roam around all through black's pawn chain. And as you can see, it caused some serious positional struggles for black. Okay? And finally, piece value is relative. This bishop here, complete monster, worth arguably as much as a queen, because it just ties down so much material here. It ties down all of these three pieces, and arguably even the rook. Okay? Which is why, maybe even earlier on, after this first mistake, maybe black should just give up the rook, so that they wouldn't have to face these issues on the dark squares for the entire game. Okay. Well, I'll just play through the whole game one more time. And black resigns. Okay. Oh, and if you're curious about the computer evaluation, this is pretty much equal until rook b8. This is now +3 for white, because of this dark squared bind. And after rook a5, this is now +6. And now there are just no good answers. Yeah, the material is equal, but clearly white's space advantage is crushing, especially when this light squared bishop was unable to move for the entire game. Okay, well, I think I've sufficiently overanalyzed this bullet game. Hope you could learn a thing or two, and catch you next time.